Is this live now? Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
what are you drinking?
I've just got coffee.
Really? No. Mate, don't disappoint me like that, brother. What
I
what
couldn't
what do you
put my red wine glass on here. I thought, you know what I'll do? I'll stick it in a coffee cup.
I got gin and kombucha, so that's been my method lately. I've been trying that, and yeah, it's a good medicinal therapy.
Mate, I can't fault you on that because kombucha cleans your gut and your gin will clean your head.
Well, mate, fat boy here. I'm trying to lose a bit, so I've been doing this thing lately where I've just been eating this mixture of salmon, um, kimchi, um, um, sauerkraut, like this fermented foods, and olives, and that's been my meals lately. And I've actually loved it. It's great. And then I thought, well, I'm not going to. Yeah, they say you shouldn't be drinking, but I'm not. I can't do that. So I've been mixing that with kombucha just to see what happens with that, and it's all just fun anyway. It's another day. My age, you just got to explore life, mate. And so I'm talking to yes, you see his name is Cal Paczensky. Mate, where's Paczensky come from?
So, a long way back, Russia.
Yep.
During the First World War, when the Russians overthrew the Tsars, my family were related to the last Tsar Nicholas of Russia.
Oh, really?
Had to flee Russia and left Russia and headed for India. As you
Well,
know,
see, you're royalty.
they're putting claims in at the moment to try and get some artifacts that were Tsar Nicholas II, I think he was.
You're right, mate.
To try and retrieve that for the family.
Mate,
How much that's legitimate is it's up for people to decide.
Explains a lot about the beard, brother. Really does.
Rasputin.
And now, look, Carl and I are pretty recent mates, last few years or a number of years, whatever. It's actually more than a few now. But one thing I was going to get in a cheap shot because half of his body's covered with tattoos supporting Manchester United in football, and my family's a bit of a Liverpool family. And I was going to put the shot in, but after the last weekend, I can't say it.
I said to Nathan, I was looking forward so much to tonight, and I probably wouldn't have done the podcast if we'd got. I would have said to you, I probably wouldn't have picked your phone call up. But I was so happy to talk to someone like you this week. I've been on cloud nine because a lot of Liverpool fans, funnily enough, have not reached out to me.
And look, mate, for me, I'm going to ask you about your bloodline there in a minute. But for me, I love football. Like, I grew up as a kid. I was a mad sports person. I was a swimmer. I played cricket was probably my main sport. Hockey was like another sport I played regularly, but I'd switch between season to season, hockey to football, football being soccer, hockey to football, hockey to football. And back in my days when I was a kid, we only got to see the Premier League, on Sunday afternoons before Countdown came on. I think it was. They do that.
It was just the league.
Yeah. And the first thing I got to see was Newcastle playing, and Malcolm McDonald was the striker for Newcastle. And my mum and dad actually for a present Newcastle, they bought me a kit, and I had a Newcastle kit. And I was never really like following a team religiously, but on my wife's side of things, her father's father, well, her father's a mad Arsenal guy, and during World War II, her grandfather was actually the guy who trained the Green Berets or Red Berets, whatever they were in their physical training. He was a serious, British Army guy. Yeah. But during World War II, a lot of the Premier League or whatever it was back then, the football league players got sent to the war, and he actually played for top level Arsenal during the World War II time. And he remembers the bus coming up to his house. My father-in-law remembers his bus, the Arsenal bus coming up to his house, and his dad hopping on the bus and going to that. So he's a mad Arsenal guy. So we should probably have followed that line. But what happened was my eldest son, Harry, when he was about 5 or 6, that was when we let him sit up, and he was playing football from day one. And all our kids played the top level in Queensland, the Queensland Premier League stuff. They all did that. But, three of the four did. And but we let him watch his first FA Cup final. And that year, Liverpool were playing, and he got to see them turn up at the stadium in their suits and get off the bus and all that. And he became just Liverpool was his thing from that day onwards, and he brainwashed all the other kids. So we had that sort of short heritage of supporting Liverpool, and obviously last year was a great year, and the Klopp era was awesome for Liverpool and everything else. But mate, we don't have that same. To my phone, I think. We don't have that same heritage you do, mate, which is like seriously in the bloodstream. So, how did you become a Man United guy?
That's probably Jurgen Klopp calling you now.
Yeah,
it's Klopp calling you now saying get
that's
off.
my sister calling me. She's I called her before and she's calling me back, and I hadn't to put on silent. Sorry about that, but she's not football related. But mate, back to you and your Man United tats, mate. Where's that all come from?
So my heritage, obviously born in Greenwich, which most Man United fans are born in London. They're not born in Manchester. I'll tell you that now. 99%. There's a Guinness T-shirt was out in the 90s. 99% of Man United fans have never stepped inside Old Trafford.
I mean, no, they had the best marketing machine back in the day. I mean, when you got players like Beckham and Scholes and all that, how are you not going to promote the hell out of that and win the world over?
Well, even going back to Charlton, Best and Law, and I'm getting very deep into it. Look, to answer your question quickly, my grandfather was Man United, born and raised in Ireland, and he told me, you won't be supporting any other team. My dad was West Ham. My mother was QPR. Yep. And he said, you will not support anyone else. When I was 3 years old, the urban myth goes that my grandfather took me to Old Trafford to watch us get relegated to the second division back then.
Oh, really? Wow.
Dennis Law, I was in the ground when Dennis Law backheeled the goal into our net against us because he played for City. He'd left United and played for City. We got relegated, but to be fair, if you add the numbers up, we were already relegated before that game. So that's a bit of urban myth. From there, moved to Australia in 74 for a better life. And football's always been in my blood. My grandfather told me, you'll only ever support Man United. And probably my two crosses I bear and the biggest loves in my life are Man United and music.
Yep.
Yeah, those two. So,
the only thing that I love football, I love the Premier League, especially, of course, and UEFA, everything. I love all those games, but it really pisses me off these days where they keep switching how you can watch it. I go into Optus with my phone when you can watch on Optus Sports. Now you got Stan, you got to buy Stan and then get Stan Sports and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh guys, get over it. Just
it's let us watch the game. It's big bickies, Nick. It's big bickies. We think State of Origin is the pinnacle in Australia. Well, I do. It's the pinnacle sport. I mean, that happens weekly in the Premier League, you know. You know that. Liverpool playing Man United on the weekend would have been the most watched football game of the year. Forget
NFL. It's bigger than the Olympics, mate. It's bigger than all that stuff.
100%. So, it's a great sport. It's a great passion. The last couple of years, unfortunately, has not been great to me, but I've had...
the last couple of years have been great, mate. They've been really good years.
In the 80s, when I grew up, Liverpool won everything. Liverpool were the team to beat. It was Liverpool and Arsenal, and we were a cup team.
Yeah. Well, that Arsenal team, mate, like what they call the Immortals or whatever it was, they were amazing.
Well, the Invincibles who comes through.
Invincibles, that was it, yeah.
Look, there were so many great teams. And I thankfully grew up in an era where United had Sir Alex Ferguson, like you had Buzz, your great coach. I can't think of his name because I don't really care, but it was your great coach. He was a Scotsman as well.
I can't remember who you're talking about there, but I remember. I actually read your guy's book and that whole thing about when he came into it, and they really were not really training properly, but the way he shaped that team, and what I loved about what he did was he developed so many young players through their system. And you compare that to today where they buy everybody in, and it's very rare to have someone that's come up through the local club system. But, mate, Fergie, you got to give it to him. He created a group of players that were the heart and soul of the England team because he
100%.
took them through. And it's just sad that when they play for England, they keep screwing up all the time. I'd love to see him win a World Cup again.
It's not a team that could have won the World Cup. But yeah, Ferguson carried on the legacy of Sir Matt Busby, where they brought people through the academy. Yeah?
Yep, absolutely.
That was a great thing. And, you know, him and Arsene Wenger from Arsenal changed the way footballers think about diet, drinking culture, which was massive in the 70s and 80s. 60s, it was finish your game, drink. You could smoke at halftime. None of that exists nowadays because of body science and sports psychology.
But George Best was United, wasn't he?
Yes.
I mean, talk about a wild boy of football and being able to play at that level, doing what he did, you know. But you look at Messi and playing in America now. I mean, the way he scored goal after goal after goal in America is just amazing. And mate, it's a great sport. I love it. And we have fun between us because it's in your blood. It's something I love, and we've kind of adopted as a family group, you know. But we're not that same level you are, and I respect the fact that when you've got that heritage behind you, that you do live it heart and soul enough to cover 99% of your body in tattoos with it, you know.
It's the only thing I've destined my life on. Is my blueprint will be Man United. That's ingrained in my fabric. 100%. But you're the same with the Broncos, Queensland?
Oh, Queensland, definitely. I grew up with that whole thing. That's our equivalent of it here. My thing with United mainly was I spent a decade doing stuff in China. One of the guys I was really close with in the whole China journey who ended up screwing me over bad time. He was a big United guy, and that put my nose out of the joint more than the actual the reality of a contest does. It's people you know and experiences you go through. And I'm not into it that level where I wouldn't talk to you because United beat Liverpool this weekend. I'm like, well, shit, I wish I could be having a go at you about Liverpool beating United. But exactly. It's just fun.
It's the only reason why I wore this shirt. I was going to wear an Oasis shirt, and I thought, no, next to Liverpool fan, I have to wear it.
Yeah, man, that's good. 100% thumbs up to you, brother. Mate, we've been, it's great. I know you've been following my little chats I've been doing. I did a great chat last night with a guy called Glenn Bidmead. He's like I kind of like the Nick Phillips of Sydney. I like he's been there forever, and he's does a cover thing I do, but he's also written a lot of music and gone through the same journey. But you and I, through the last few years, you work for you're a booking agent and a tour manager, and but your background is you're a singer. Right. So, mate, what was your path? Okay, we touched on footy. We'll move on from there. Your music journey, bro. Where did that start from?
Well, it intertwines with a guy you had on the show probably about, only a week ago, and then a couple of weeks ago before that as well, Dan Whittam. So Dan and I, it all intertwines, and it's like a Game of Thrones story. It goes back to football.
You raised dragons.
Yes. This isn't the chair I normally sit in.
that throne.
It's I met Dan at Eastern Suburbs Football Club. We were mates. We'd actually had shared double dated a couple of times with a couple of chicks that we knew, and that's how we met. And we're on a trip away one year, and I said, oh, man, I used to sing in this band because I started this backyard band called FSA, which were called the Funky Sex Addicts, right? Right,
yeah.
It was nothing to do with funk. It was rock and roll with a mate of mine, Martin Petrak, at the Gap. And I told Dan about it. Dan goes, well, I play guitar. Why don't we see if we can get some rehearsal space at East for free and just have a jam? I've got a mate of mine. And
Johnny Lang's home ground, mate. Johnny Lang's home ground.
Was it really?
Yeah, he was an East boy.
East soccer.
Oh, soccer. Sorry, okay.
Not league, remember? We met football.
Right. Yeah, sorry.
So we'd sit around there. So we'd get a cut and a VB. We'd fill one of the bins full of ice, and we'd sit there. They'd give us the keys to open up at midday, and we'd go through till 5 on a Sunday afternoon in summer. Right. So it was hot as buggery, no air conditioning, but we had this big bin full of ice, VBs, and we played through everything we loved, which at the time was a lot of U2, Neil Young, There was
What
another.
year was this?
This was 95, 90, 94, 95.
Okay, yep.
Yeah. Fast forward to my brother came over from overseas, and I set him to task and say, hey, we've got a band together. Could you find us some gigs, get out on the road and start working as an agent, find us gigs? He came across Jan Dooley's email. God rest her soul, she's now passed. Jan Dooley ran the entertainment for Dooley's in
the Valley.
In the Valley. Dooley's was the first and the start of all the Irish bars back in the day. There was no other Irish bars around back then. It was just Dooley's. Jan said, come down and do an audition, which we did. We only knew 4 songs. So we did, I think in our audition, we did Wonderwall 3 times. And we did one by U2, a lot of U2 stuff, and a lot of Britpop stuff. There was a massive, we were born in such a very fruitful era in the 90s where Seattle grunge was meeting with Britpop at the same time, and Australia had this alt rock as well going on with UMI and Powderfinger and The Gurge and all that stuff. So there was a huge plethora of melting pots of music that we could pick from to cover.
Yeah.
Whereas today I find a lot tougher for artists. It's country or nothing. So back then it was all this stuff. So she gave us a couple of things. She said, look, I'll hire you guys. I want you to play some traditional Irish folk though. She wanted the Pogues, and it just wasn't us. It wasn't us. And that sort of stuff. And I said, look, yep, okay, we will. Dan ran the thing and said, yep, we will. We'll do that. We never to this day ever played anything. Because when we took the stage, she was never there to see it anyway. And as long as we had good bar takers, so we ran that since 96, late 95, early 96 to 2000 and just through 2000.
And what was the name of the band?
Trafford
Band, okay.
Trafford, because I took it as Old Trafford. It's Old Trafford. So most of us were Man U fans, and those that weren't, I didn't want to know. They made Man U. So we're called Trafford. We brought out an original CD which was recorded. Didn't do very well, but we had a go at it like most people did. From there, Trafford played Friday, Saturday, Sunday for 4 years at the same venue. They pushed out Hot Toddy, which were a band back in the day, Hot Toddy. Yeah. Some other bands that played there. Ned Walker's band played there, Amy's Bass, who played a couple of times. But we got residency there, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for 4 years. And that's where I honed my craft of stagemanship, frontman, my Larry, I am the dude, which most frontmen sort of need. And the guys behind me did the same thing. After that, I took a break, went to Canada, came back. Leroy Bath reached out to me because Warren from Blah, Blah, Blah had decided to call it quits. And Leroy wouldn't let him go until Warren found a replacement. So he'd auditioned. Leroy's story was 15 to 17 dropouts from the first season of Australian Idol from Brisbane.
Yep.
Had the great vocals and couldn't deliver stage show. That Warren's an incredible. Warren Spiteri is an incredible frontman. He's almost like
Michael Hutchins type.
Michael Hutchins in excess. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. He was incredible and sex appeal. And I thank God I never watched him before I went to the audition. I didn't know anything about Warren. I just knew me, and I was that confident and cocky that I could do it. Did the audition we did an acoustic audition at Leroy's place first, and he said vocals were good, which is weird because my vocals aren't as good as Warren's. They never have been. My vocals are the only that probably let me down. Stage performance, though, after one gig at Rana Leagues, he said, "You got the job." Straight away.
Mate, isn't it funny looking back at those days where you honed your craft in a residency? residencies work so well, man. They're insofar as people, so many venues today, I think they've got to have a different act on every week. But the point is, people like to think they own part of what you do. They feel like they want to be a part of something. When you're in a residency gig, they get to know you, and then they tell their friends, and they come along. They know that you're going to be there next week, and they know what to expect. They know your songs. They get to be part of the gang. They get to be part of the whole thing. And it's such a shame that doesn't happen these days, because I had the same thing. I played it. Tuffy played it. Tuffy and myself played at Fridays Boulevard for over 10 years. He did every Friday night. I did every Saturday night. I did about 6 years at Her Majesty's, where I was playing some nights, 6 nights a week at the venue. But I was definitely there every Saturday. And as an artist, you get to hone your craft so well, but you also get to build a relationship with the people who come to those venues, who then become your marketing points, where they will tell their friends to come down, and there's nothing better than word of mouth marketing. And venues just don't do it anymore. I don't get it, mate. And we'll get to that in a while as your role as an agent. But sorry, I went off track a little bit. But that time in the 90s, I was 92, 94. I lived in Los Angeles, and I ended up doing my first album over there, Poetry and Beer. And I was working with some guys called the Robb Brothers, who own Cherokee Studios, which is like one of the top 5, probably top 3 studios in LA. And they'd been big producers, engineers and producing back in the 70s. They worked with like Cat Stevens, Beach Boys. They did Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney stuff together. All this, they did Rod Stewart's Atlantic Crossing, all that stuff. And they got out of producing in the late 80s because the music had gone a different direction. Early 90s, when I got there, they were doing things like the Lemonheads and Buffalo Tom, and other bands that were coming through. And you'd be working in one studio, and the Spin Doctors were in the studio next to you, and next door was Lita Ford, being produced by Gene Simmons and all these people. And it got back to really good songs. And that whole grunge thing brought back good songs. And we were there. K-Rock was the channel in California at the time. And it was breaking. Smashing Pumpkins, Pearl Jam, Nirvana were big. Kurt hadn't killed himself. Oh, there's word going around now that he may not have killed himself, that something else happened. But we were there when the Lemonheads were recording an album called Come and Feel the Lemonheads, which went gold. The Robb Brothers had produced and engineered that album. And I was there. They were looking at doing my stuff. And the problem for me was that while they were working my stuff, they loved my songwriting. It reminded them of the Cat Stevens days. That where it got screwed up for me was because Lemonheads went so big, they were suddenly knocking back doing a Guns N' Roses album, doing these really big albums. I kind of got put on the back burner for a while I was there, and I ended up finishing my album with one of their head engineers, and we did that. But it was such a great time, that early 90s, for good songs coming out. They got back to songwriting. And I remember the first time I heard Teen Spirit from Nirvana. I was at a shop in Toowong, a fish and chip shop, and it came on, and this lady started talking about, have you heard this song? She cranked it right up, and it was like, just never heard anything like Teen Spirit before. It was amazing. So it was a great time playing music, mate. It was really good.
There's a couple of points you raised there that really hit home with me. There was no social media back in the 90s. So word of mouth, you had to either get out, you'd see some artists and cover bands stapling their stuff or sticking their stuff to poles or billboards. There was the Music Express or rave magazines that we'd ring up and put our ads in. And if you saw your name in that, you'd think you'd made it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember we did our CD launch for Trafford's original CD the CD was called Pull Back on the Pavarotti. And it was a phrase that was coined by one of the engineers. It might have been Tim Class-Orloff, actually. I think you might know him from Story Bridge. I was singing too much operatic sort of stuff in the vocal booth, and he said, "Hey man, do me a favor and just pull back on the Pavarotti a little bit and just be you." I'm like, that is a incredible name for an album title. Let's call it Pull Back on the Pavarotti. Anyway, that was put in Rave magazine, but right next to that, my claim to fame was Travis had just brought out their album with Why Does It Always Rain on Me, reviewed right next to mine, and I got one more star out of my review for our album than they did. I've kept that forever. I've kept 90 copies of it in my room somewhere that I look at sometimes in the middle of the night. It's something that keeps me going. The other thing I like to say is what you said before. The word of mouth thing, it comes back to a song that I grew up with, which is the theme song from Cheers, the show.
Yep.
You want to go to a bar where everyone knows your name and you feel included. Music is an inclusive instrument, marketing tool. And I used to love playing residencies because of that same fact. And good soloists, good bands who know how to work it is to make yourself familiar to the bar staff, to the venue promoter, to the owners, so they go, I just know him. I can't sack him. He's like family. You know what I mean? He's so good. And the punters know you, and they know you're going to be there. So whenever they're out and about, they know, I don't need street press. I know Trafford's going to be on at this time to this time. Let's just fall back there and just, cheers.
Well, I had a situation at Her Majesty's where back in those days, I remember us being booked by Manic, which was the version of Pushworth before Pushworth was Manic, and they booked me into this place, Her Majesty's Bar, and the first Saturday afternoon I played there was literally no one in the room, and I'm up there playing, and they had this little bar next to it called the Prince Edward Bar, and I got to about into my last set, and 3 or 4 guys who were drunk from Prince Eddie Bar came in, and they started like throwing shit at me and a few words and everything. I threw it back at them, and I did their requests, and they loved it. And it was like literally 4 guys. And spring forward 12 months, those 4 guys, it ended up, okay, this is back in the 90s, they would just finish up at Padua High School. So they were too young to be there for starters, but they were there. But mate, they would come in every Saturday, set up their tables across the front of the room, get their $1 back in there, their $1 rum and cokes or whatever, and they get a tray of them. They sit there, and they had actions to every one of my songs, and we would have 450 people every Saturday in that room, and you'd have people coming off the Queen Street Mall to watch them doing their actions to my songs. And it was they became part of the show that just kept the place building. And it was the same thing at Fridays. When we started at Fridays, I remember Mick Flanders, a really good mate of mine, was working at Manic at that time. He booked me in up Fridays, and I started playing that room. There's no one there. Slowly over time, Tuffy and I they turned that bar into Tuffy's bar they had, and we redid the room up, and we made it focus on, they got a proper stage in, and we did it properly. And for 10 years, people would come in and bring their friends, and people driving up from Brisbane for the weekend or Caboolture from the weekend to stay and watch Nick and Tuffy at Friday's Malula Bar. And you'd think people would get bored of seeing us every week, but no, they loved that vibe of knowing what was going on, bringing their friends along and creating an atmosphere that was just amazing. And those venues made so much money out of entertainment. It got killed when the pokies came in.
100%.
They changed the focus from being on entertainment to being on the pokies and restaurants and everything else, and we lost a big section of what we could do as artists in those days. But I think the residencies, mate, that's something we've got to start talking to venues back to, because so many of these, even these smaller rooms, my job as an artist when you're doing a cover gig is not just to get up there and be the cool musician. It's about getting to know the people, getting to make them feel they're part of ownership of what I'm doing, they're part of what I'm doing, tell their friends about it, and it becomes a cool thing. Social media doesn't change that. Word of mouth is still the strongest way to promote anything, I believe.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Look, the artists that do it well are the artists I book again and again and again. And we'll get to the agency stuff I'm doing now, but my strongest artists are the ones who are 360-degree artists, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah. Mate, was going back to my time in LA too. It was really interesting. Evan Dando was the lead singer of Lemonheads.
One of my idols. because he was one of my idols because he became very, very good friends with Liam and Noel.
Oh, okay. Well, we got to hang out with him a lot, and I remember one day he turned up for a recording session. He was in these silk pajamas. He hadn't got over his pajamas. He came up, but he was very insecure. He was like always worried about what people thought about what they're doing. And the thing in those days, a lot of those bands, like Nirvana, even I think this is like Kurt's problem. They came out of garage bands. They were like garage bands and local scenes. They got picked up by major labels and very quickly became very big artists. But they never actually had the confidence of that, 10, 20 years of getting to where they're going to be. They were like thinking that they had to do what the record company said. And there was one time where they're in the middle of recording Come on Feel the Lemonheads.
Yeah.
They'd been booked by not Big Mountain, something Mountain, whatever that label was, who were the management company. They got booked to go and do a festival in the UK, and Evan didn't want to do it, but he couldn't. He didn't have the confidence to say no, so he went over, stopped the recording, went over, did the festival, and sat up all night in his motel room screaming so he lost his voice, so he couldn't do the gig. He just didn't want to do the gig. And it was that insecurity. And the Rob brothers, to their, I love what they did. They really took him under their wing. And Gold Mountain was the management company. They kind of took Evan under their wing and protected him a lot and helped him get through that whole scenario. But people don't realize that the big eye opener for me, working in Cherokee at that time, and the people we were surrounded by, like, Ice-T would be doing an interview in the lounge room with MTV and all this stuff going on around us. But everyone there at the time, because they were working in the studio, they weren't being superstars, they were being just ordinary people doing their jobs, and we got to meet people on that level. And what I realized was that a lot of the people there were no better than the people who were working here in Brisbane. It's just they're in a different environment, they're in a different scenario, and they got to be very successful and big stars because of their environment. But we had so much talent going around the place here, mate, in those days. And I think we still do. There's so much talent that can be recognised from here, but we've just never grown in the industry around the talent,
I do think it's our population. Obviously, if you make it in America, you're minted, right? Same as the UK.
But even in those sense, there were people working in the studio with me who we'd never heard of, who apparently were major stars in Brazil or France or other countries.
Japan.
They were great export products, but they weren't known locally. We've never looked at our industry and how do we actually take what we do and a lot of the Indigenous artists here, mate. I did an interview recently with Junga G, a guy who came out of a band called Aim for More, and he's producing some great music, and it's not. I think he'll do well here. He's been charting the indie, topping the indie charts, but also I think he could be a major success, not globally perhaps, but in certain international regions. And I'd love to see some things getting in place from our governments to actually support looking at our music industry as an export product, like they look at coal and our grains and everything else. How do we because digital content is like the major content being consumed around the world. We make great digital content. How about we get some help for doing that?
Brother, like I said to you at the start of this, I won't get into politics because it annoys me. We are looked as an afterthought as an industry. There's a number of reasons for that. We don't have a governing body. We have no one who stands up for us. We are like, I've told you this many times, the William Wallace era of Scotland, where we're all fractured all undercutting each other, and no one brings us together and goes, this is what we stand for. This is what we are, and you cannot buy us for this. We are this. We are a proper industry. We are moving towards that with this super wave that's coming through where people are acknowledging us, but government do not acknowledge us as an export commodity at all.
Yeah. Mate, so before we jump there too quickly, you say your early life was as a singer, as a performer, frontman. Where did your jump come from being that to working in the agency industry side of things?
Okay, so getting women pregnant made me slow down. Can I say it like that? We're still in the 70s. This is Kingswood country. Surely I can say that. Leave your money on the fridge, Nick. You know what I mean?
Expand on that, brother.
No, I can't. This is not the era to expand on that. Yeah, look, I had too many kids, and
you decided you had to make money. Is that what
Father Time was catching up with me. My voice was never my selling point. My selling point was my stage show. Everyone knows that. There's so many other great singers that were before me, during me, and after me that I stepped aside. And then it was just an innocuous conversation I had with Nathan. We were on a bus going somewhere.
Is it Nathan Ward you talked about there? Right?
Sorry, Nathan Ward, yes. Yeah. It was, one day, man, I reckon we can do a better job as an agency eventually. At the time, we were working for a great agent. He still is a great agent, John Shelley, Gig Factory. But he thought we could do better. Now, my line of work outside of the band, so for many years I just did bands and I picked up the dole. Now, when the GST came in, you couldn't do that. It wasn't cash in hand. I used to get cash in hand from Doolies. And I used to go to, I'm just segueing a little bit, but I'll come back. I used to go to Job Club during the week to fulfill my dole requirements. And in that Job Club were 3 members of Regurgitator. So we all went to the same Job Club at Greenslopes. And one of the guys in Regurgitator, this is how bad it was back in the day, Regurgitator said, I can't come next week. We're doing big day out in New Zealand and then Gold Coast and then we're in Perth. And they went, oh, okay, that's fine. We'll sign you up for that. And I'm thinking, this is the Regurgitator of the 90s, right?
Yeah, good. Yeah, the big thing.
It tells you everything, what we all used to do. I was clearing close to $1,000 a week back then from the dole and then gigs in hand.
Right.
From Doolies. And that for me paid my rent and my living expenses big time back then. So coming back to what we were talking about, I don't think I could do that these days because of GST. You couldn't do that at all.
Yep.
Where I would go these days as an artist, you've got to work 4 to 5 gigs a week, maybe a double. So my journey was that to start with. And then I went on to thinking about, okay, I'm coming to the end of my career. I left Blah. I joined Jabba as their singer, which is where Nathan and Soul came into it. And their residency got cut short because they wanted to change. Now, Jabba had been there for 13 years, I think, at Irish Murphy's.
Irish Murphy's, yeah.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for 13 years, which is phenomenal when you think about it.
Yep.
I'd want to change too if I was a venue manager. 13 years of the same band. After a while, you do need to change. So they approached me and said, hey, would you be interested in coming on board part-time as our salesperson? At the time, I'm a recruiter for 13, 15 years. I'm doing recruitment during the week, which is not far-fetched from what they're basically doing. As an agent, what you're doing is finding artists that meet the criteria and demographic for rooms. What I was doing was finding people for jobs that fit the demographic of their team and can solve and tick all the boxes they want duties-wise. So it was a no-brainer for me. It would bring my passions together, music, and I'd already had a recruitment background, so I could go through CVs being electronic, promotion kits at the end of it. But back then when we first started, was just, what have you done? Show me what you've done. Show me where you've worked. Let me come and see how you play. Let me hear you sing. And let me hear you if you fit the dynamic that we need for that room.
Hey, quick commercial break. Big shout out to our sponsor for today's episode, which is me, Nick Phillips. Look, I've got to thank myself so much. I couldn't be doing the show without me. And if you get a chance, check out the sponsor's website, www.nickphillips.com. Check out my music, my videos, my bio, all that stuff, and maybe contact me and book me for a gig. That would be great. But thanks, Nick, for your sponsorship. Back to the show.
My relationships with venues. When I first left the music scene, I wanted to make sure that if I was going to become an agent, I wanted to make sure that I left the industry in a better place than when I found it. That's a pretty cliche statement. But for me, agents were looked on as we look on lawyers. They're like, or pimps, where you're feeding off somebody else's hard work. I wanted to make sure the artists knew that I was out there trying to get them new venues, better pay, better conditions. If it's not going to work for me, why would I do it? Every time I approach a venue, I always say, would I take that deal? Would I do a 3-hour gig for $80 an hour as a soloist, buy my own drinks and buy my own meal, play in the sun? It's things like that that always stick out to me, and it's not about making sure that the venue's happy with me. It's making sure that the venue are happy. Yeah, great. But if the artist isn't happy, I can't keep giving them top shelf artists.
So, mate, I'll ask you, and I think we can have some reality chats here as well around what you're saying there, because one of the questions I think a lot of people will look at is going back to the 80s and 90s. It was different. It was a different playing field where booked through Graham Hutchinson. I'd booked through Manic when he had them, or Greg Shaw managed me for a long time, and a lot of the stuff was about we had drawing power. We actually could make money for the venues really well. Things have changed a lot where artists have lost that drawing power, and venues put artists in to help with the atmosphere and everything else. How has the role changed from an agency perspective, where back then they really were pushing, they would push for top dollar for artists. If I was pulling in a lot of people into Her Majesty's, I'd say I did my own negotiating. I'd say to the venue, I need this dollar to go up, and the agency would act on my behalf and do it. Now, as you're in the agent world, do you have to represent more the venue or the artist?
I think most venues know I'm representing the artists. The top manager nationally in ABC, which is one of the biggest booking hotel groups, always looked at me as, you always take the artist side. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Because the way we set up the company, and I always said this, the way you encourage your sales staff to get our artists more money is you make their commission on top of, not out of. So for many, many years, and this is going to be hard for a lot of people to grasp, for many, many years, agents took their money out of the fee. So if you get told it's $1,200 and then I'll take 10%, you'd expect, okay, I'm getting $1,200. Well, no, you're not. You're getting $1,200 less the agent's 10%. I want it round the other way. I want it, if I tell you a figure, that's what you're clearing, plus GST these days. My aim, so if I say to a venue, it's going to cost you $1,200 for a band, 10% on top, it's going to cost you $1,320, because that's my $120 that I've earned on top. And if I say to the venue, I want 15% on top, but I want the band to get $1,300, that's more money in my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
15% that I negotiate is for me.
Now, it was easier back in the days when we had the pulling power because I was putting bums on seats and things like that. It was easy for the agents to go in and represent me in those days. It is harder these days insofar as a lot of venues aren't relying on entertainment as much to put bums on seats. It's about just creating part of the atmosphere. What as artists can we do more to help you as an agent to empower your conversations in getting more money for artists?
Well, that's what I'm at. Yeah, look, I think we touched on it before. The 360-degree artists, the ones who completely do the marketing. So 180 degrees is your performance.
Mm-hmm.
Be the best you can be. Be on time. Have your, interim music ready to go. So you're pumping it out if that's a venue that asks for that. But the other 180 degrees is putting it on socials. Venues invariably look at socials all the time. What's this guy doing to market us? I see his posts. He's great. So you're one. Bam's another one. He does it, flogs the hell out of it. These are my gigs this month. And alter egos do it as well. These are my gigs this month. These are my gigs this week. Get along and see them.
Yep.
I've seen, Angie's starting to do it too a lot now too.
Yep.
All the time. The ones at the 360 degrees, so the 180 degrees that I'm looking for is the ones that are, A, have their calendars up to date, their Google calendars up to date. 2, do all the marketing without me asking. 3, turn up to gigs and never pull out unless it's absolute dire. And they're the ones that I'll throw all the work to because I know I don't have to go back and rebook for.
Okay. So, mate, if young people see this who are getting into the game, getting in and want to get out there and get live gigging, what's the best? You're part of one of the major agencies in Queensland, and it's growing and going to be it's heading in a very exciting direction. How do they approach you? How do they get onto you? How do they connect to you?
Well, firstly, I would say there's a forum coming up run by Dan Whittam, which I'm sure you're going to touch on shortly, that I'm going to be speaking at. And that's a great way to dip your foot in the pool. Someone like Dan, yourself, who are doing so much for the industry, follow these podcasts, spread the word. We are becoming a community more than the divided suburbs of Scotland. You know what I'm talking about. So for me, get in touch with me by hitting the Facebook page for us, hitting our website, sending me.
And I'll put those links up, by the way, mate, so you just see, and I'll put those links up.
Myself, Nathan, info@gateway.entertainment.com.au is the best place to hit it because they all get vetted. We have a look at them. We'll even come out and have a look at you. For me, that's the easiest way. But if you've got all those things in line, make sure you've got the ones who get booked all the time are the ones that send me a link to their Google Calendar. Mm-hmm. The ones that have good EPK that I can send through to. I'm getting to the point now where I don't need to send EPK to some venues. They say to me, you pick them, you know what you're doing, and you go with it. But EPK is still great to break new ground. And we're getting so many. I just had a conversation today with Nathan, my business partner, Nathan Ward, and we're looking at bringing on more staff because we've got too many rooms to handle.
Yeah.
So too many rooms means I need more soloists, duos, bands.
Okay, so let's stick on those. People coming new into the game at the moment. You talked about what Dan Whittam's going in, and people, if you just go back a few episodes in my little thing here, you'll see Dan talking about a conference day he has coming up. Where he's got some great advice to share about how you get everything right from accessing an agency, how do you approach gig venues yourself, how do you run your gear properly, how do you work in with plugging into the gear that the venues have, all those really things that are vital. But if you've got anything you'd like to share about what Dan's doing, that you because I know you're speaking at his event, he said it's a full day event at Milton. It's about $270 to attend the whole event, and I highly recommend people do that. Dan's he's not It's a real deal thing. But mate, you're speaking at it. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that event and what people should do?
Dan and I is who I've been. Dan's where I started my musical career. We've been mates since. He's taught me to grow as a person, and what he puts back into the industry is it's untangible. It's priceless, because for me, I get a phone call from Dan. This guy's a good artist. You should check him out. Worth booking. Now, I've had close to 25 of those artists come through my books, play my venues, because I give him a start, and he's not wrong. He spends so much time with them, honing on their craft, telling them what they need to get right. And Dan, without Dan, our little community wouldn't hit that. Okay, going back to the football analogy, he's the Sir Alex Ferguson, bringing people through the academy through to the first team. Okay, so people like, and I'll give you success stories. Marty Kay, who came from Canberra, my most successful person from Dan. Ryan Knack, who's made waves wherever I open it. New ground. He's a new young kid, but he's tall, good-looking rooster, plays all the hip new stuff, but has homage to Fleetwood Mac and James Taylor and all the artists that came before him. He's not too stuck in the ways where he only wants to play one genre. He caters to everyone.
So is it fair to say, like, what Dan's doing, and I'm happy to have. I'd love to have other agents on to chat here as well. I wanted our industry is about multiple things. But I do most of my work through Gateway, and but it's fair to say that what you're looking at doing is not just booking people into gigs, but actually mentoring them into how to do it properly.
I'd like to think so, but look, that's I'm trying to give them direction, because I didn't have that when I was coming through. I had to work it out as you did, as you went. I didn't have a great mentor. Dan and I found our feet. The 90s was such a fruitful era for us, and I'll never forget it. And I'll always look back at it fondly. But I don't want to be someone from the 60s going, oh, that was the best genre. There's even today's music. I saw Teddy Swims do the grand final for NRL, and I was blown away, and I didn't rate him before that. And I thought it was fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. New music coming through is so good. This Benson Boone, fantastic. Like, all these new artists, amazing. I would like to think that Dan is the Alex Ferguson or Sir Matt Busby, bringing him through the academy, and I'm giving him a first start, and he's my academy coach, and he says, give him a jersey, see how they go. And I slowly dip them in until eventually now I'll go, if I can't get my Nick Phillips or my Blake Durant's, I will look to Ryan Knack is the next generation coming through, mate.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, your role is not to mentor himself, but to work with your network around you to make sure they're getting the right advice from that group of that community, and create that community that's working well. Mate, so from your perspective, there's a lot we could talk all day about the negatives of our industry, right? And I've bitched a lot about what happened through COVID and everything else, but are you feeling quite confident about where our industry is going, or you feel like we've got too many hurdles? Where's your head at as to what we can do?
Look, the super thing is throwing us all through the ringer, and I'm sure it's going to come out in the wash in the next 6 months about what venues.
So you're talking about superannuation there, and just the government support they didn't, where gig economy has to be paying super, which I think should have come in 30 years ago. I would love to have had that done properly, but I've never. And I never had the skills to put that together myself properly. And because the way our industry works is it's not like you get a weekly wage. You've got money coming in a bit spasmodically, and it's really hard to juggle and put a budget together when it's all around the place and you're not focused on being a financial person. So that's what you're talking about with they brought in a thing where super's coming in. And I know that with Gateway, you're working with Hot Giggity to put together a platform where super gets covered through the whole process and all that. So that's a big challenge. But beyond that, Yeah, look at like original music. Obviously, has the challenge these days with AI and everything else. But I'm actually feeling, and say throwing this whole thing on you, mate. I'll give you my thoughts. I'm quietly feeling confident about where we're heading, in that people are consuming more music than ever before. You look at what people listen to on Spotify and everything else. I think we have to find a way to get support to get better returns out of music streaming. I think that no matter what AI does, there's always other people writing songs out there, but that's not going to stop me from writing songs. And it's not going to replace me from getting up there in front of an audience and entertaining an audience. So I think that's going to keep going on. There's a change at the moment where venues seem to be booking more solos and duos and bands because of the economics of the world as at the moment. But hopefully that might even open up more rooms to do entertainment. So I'm actually feeling quite positive that we can find a way to grow our industry better. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's like we're flogging a dead horse?
I'm feeling more positive than I have for years. I think we've completely thrown off the shackles of COVID and the bullshit all that was, or whatever it was. I believe we're out the other side and people are devouring more music than ever before. And I'm getting more and more interest from events saying, I want a musician. At the same time, it swings and roundabouts. At the moment, bands are taking a massive back seat and venues are going for solos, duos, and DJs.
Right.
But it's always been this way. While I was in it, before I was in it, and after I leave it, it'll be bands are doing it so well. There's not many solo rooms or duo rooms. Bands are now taking a break. It's solos and duos. You know what it's like.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's very positive and definitely.
Yeah, very cool. Mate, I think we covered a lot of ground in this chat. And is there anything that you'd like to highlight that we haven't spoken about?
Your love of Liverpool is really disturbing.
Mate, I just don't get the supporting Red Devils all the time when it's like, we know that the dark side of the Devils and all that stuff, maybe what it is. But no, mate,
Come on!
I love you, mate. It's really good. And the fact that what I love about Australia too is that for all the hassles we have, you can go to a rugby league grand final.
We can sit next to each other.
You can go to State of Origin. We sit next to each other. We can take the piss out of each other.
You can't do that. You can't do that in the UK.
That's it, man. And I'm exploring more and more about Australian history, and I'm actually listening to an audiobook at the moment about the Eureka Stockade. And America had this revolution where they kind of, their civil war where they killed each other for years onwards. Yeah. And our Eureka Stockade, which is the closest we came to it, lasted about 20 minutes, and then we kind of went to, well, let's put a steak on the barbie and like get over this stuff. And it was a big deal, and it set up a lot of the way democratic systems work and had a lot to do with the evolving of the Labor Party and all those things. And I get that, but we tend to have this thing here where we can have differences, and all this stuff going on at the moment in the country. I know you don't want to get political, but stuff going on in the country, we need to make sure that we hang on to that stuff where we can still be mates when we disagree with each other. And I think that's a big positive for Australia that we need to hang on to. And it's in our industry, mate, our little industry. Forever in Brisbane, there's been issues between agencies and venues and all this stuff going on. It's like, end of the day, if we can find a way to work each other and make our industry better and grow it better, I think we can become a powerhouse of the Australian economy. And I saw that happen in China, mate. When I first went to China in 2006, 2007, all their industry was government subsidized, and they went through a whole change of their economy, and they turned things into where it was about part of their raising up of the standard of livings was that they empowered a lot of people to run small businesses. A big part of that was in the music industry. A lot of artists ran their own labels and everything else. And they made the arts, not just music, but the arts, one of their 5 pillars of their economy. And I think we should We could do that here. We've just got to wake the politicians up to the value of what we have in our arts sector and our music sector as an export product. It should be considered along the same lines as coal and copper and iron ore and everything else. We can drive domestic spending, and New Zealand does a great job in supporting their own local music. I have two daughters living over in New Zealand at the moment, and they can back up the fact that New Zealanders support their local artists so much. They really love it. We have to find a way to do that here, and then we have to find a way to get support to export our product as a global product. And Ireland, their main two exports back in the day were Guinness and U2. Music was a big thing of Ireland, and I think Australia should look at the same way. Our music should be a really big export product, and it's only going to happen when companies like your company with Gateway and other companies around Australia keep working with artists. Artists lift their game. We all have that incentive where we drive things further on together. And I think the challenge is in front of us, but I think we can meet that challenge and really make something super.
For me, I think you should be one of the spokesmen leading the charge, because you eloquently have stated a few times here tonight that we could be a huge export for this country. Whether politicians get on board or not will be on someone like you to sell it to them. I'm not a politician. I never proclaimed to be one. But, Nick, I don't know why you're not putting your hand up and saying, look, I should run for government, or you would get huge backing.
I'm probably old now, mate, but I think there's definitely young people coming through that without your and my experience and other people. Hey?
Bit old to be a politician.
Yeah. I think there's young people come through with the energy, but people like you and me should be behind those people, mentoring them and saying, here's what we can do and here's how we can change things. And I just love our industry. I love our music industry. I was playing in LA back in the early 90s, and this time when Counting Crows were like a local band in LA, and they were just playing locally. And I remember we did one gig somewhere, and the sound guy, who was the tech of some room, said to me, Australia's got a really unique sound. He started talking about the church and these things, and I hadn't really put my finger on it. And I was sitting in I got to have a meeting at some publishing company one time, and they actually had been set these tapes of Paul Kelly, and they asked me my opinion on Paul Kelly. And I'm like, obviously talk him up to the hill. But we do have a unique sound. I still can't put my finger on what that unique sound is, but we have it, and we have unique stories to tell. And one thing I found in China, mate, they didn't really know much about Australia in practical terms, but they knew that we had a great environment, great lifestyle, and all that. En masse, it was like this kind of general assumption they had. And we do have something that the world wants to share, and we can sell it through our music. And that helps with tourism, it helps with everything else. It's not just about selling music, it's about selling who we are as Aussies. And I think, if that's something that politicians can wake up to and support, we can become a massive part of the armament of growing the Australian economy. So
what I'm scared of is bands like AC/DC, who conquered the world in the 70s, bands like INXS, who conquered the world in the 90s, late 80s, weren't capitalised on. So where do we go from there? What's our next step?
Yeah. We have so many asks coming through that just finding ways where even, the government here in Australia went on a big thing. Obviously, when it was coming up to an election, they wanted to get the media support, but they helped the news channels get more money from social media for using their content. Well, how about you go out there and help us get more financial support for the content that Australian artists are putting out there? We need to have platforms investment into platforms here that help us sell our music to our local community. But maybe it's also about not just expecting the politicians to do everything, but just help us get frameworks in place where we can, if we put the hard work in, we can actually build platforms together through what we do, through our own efforts. And that's my belief. I don't think we want handouts. I don't think we should be getting handouts, but I think we could be a driver of the economy. And like any other industry, I'd love to see governments helping us develop those type of things.
Someone eventually will get into power that is a music background guy and go, you know what we haven't done this, and they will drive it.
It's not even a music background guy. It's going to be someone who says, one thing we learned through COVID was that we have to have every part of our economy driving results. So in other words, whether it's the pharmaceutical sector or whatever sector, we can't rely on just importing everything. We need to be creating and exporting stuff. And one of the greatest things being consumed at the world at the moment is digital content. Now, I believe government's doing a great job with the film industry, attracting investment into our film sector. How about we put incentives to attract? In Queensland, we don't really have a proper publishing company here. How about we put incentives for getting investment into, and this is things like Big Sound and that. I would love to see them delivering results where how do we attract investment into our sector so that we can grow our sector from the grassroots that we have? How do we make our grassroots as strong as possible? One of the big things we had back in the 80s and 90s, and why we got Powderfinger, why we got Keith Urban, these people coming out on global stages, was because we had such a fertile grassroots industry. Now, people like myself didn't kick the big goal and get those big things, but I was part of that grassroots industry, which enabled Keith to come out of it. He couldn't have come out of that whole thing if we didn't have that fertile industry. Yes. We need to get back to that position where we have that fertile industry, where venues are putting on more artists, where there's not a focus so much. One thing I'm going to try and do through this podcast is get some people on who can tell the truth about what's happening to our economy through poker machines and gambling and everything else, how that's damaging us and how it's damaging our music economy as well. Let's get back to looking at what music does to help people and make, from the smallest infants to the person in dementia, they connect to music. Music's part of our soul. It's part of our everything we are. And there's a spiritual connection to whatever is beyond what we are. And it's something we should take a bit more serious. And I'm going on another tangent there. But, brother, I really love your time in chatting with me on this. And if you don't mind, I'd like to get you on after you do your chat with Dan, talk about how that went, and get you on regularly. And I'd love to, especially when we get the weeks where Liverpool win. I'd like to work it around that if we could.
You won't get me. But anyway, let's pretend that's going to happen.
Okay, mate. Love you, brother.
Love you, mate. Cheers.